Great, Melissa. Thank you so much for joining us. Melissa is with Florida Friendly Landscaping, as is Doris Heitzman, and we're so grateful for your partnership and that you can help all of us employees here learn a lot more about gardening, which is also an important part of our well-being and important to have and keep the environment in mind as well. So I will let you take it away, Melissa.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. All right. I am Melissa West. I work for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. I'm the Public Education Program Coordinator, and we are going to talk about designing your landscape with pollinators in mind. There we go. Okay. Like I mentioned, I do work for the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. That is a program underneath the University of IFAS Extension through the University of Florida. And we are located here in Pinellas County. So we also are part of Pinellas County government employee as well. And we also partner with Tampa Bay Water, who is the largest wholesale water supplier in Florida. And they supply water to the local region that includes Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas counties, a couple cities like Newport Richey, St. Pete, and Tampa. All right, so today's agenda, what we're going to go over, I'm just going to do a quick overview of pollinators, and then we'll jump into site selection, plant selection, maintenance, and then we're going to talk briefly about different kinds of pollinator gardens. You're going to see a lot of overlap here in the plants, but I kind of like to break it down in case there's something in particular you're looking to bring into your yard. And then at the end, I've got a couple resources that are great if you want to go and do some more research on your end to find plants to put in your landscape. All right, so what is a pollinator? A pollinator is an animal or an insect that assists in the transfer of pollen from one flower to another or within a flower. Pollinators assist with the reproduction of over 75% of the world's flowering plants, and that includes food crops. So we rely very heavily on pollinators, and they are very important. Pollinators are more than just honeybees. I'm sure most of you guys know that, but there's maybe a few new ones in here that you weren't aware of. So some pollinators include butterflies, moths, ants, flies, wasps, birds, bats, and beetles. And of course, my favorite, the honey possum. Had to put him in here. It is the only marsupial dependent on nectar and pollen, but sadly is only found in Australia. But I like to throw him in here just A, for cuteness, and B, to show you that pollinators come in all shapes, sizes, and species. Let's get back to things that we can see here in our own backyard, butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds. I'm going to go over some quick facts and benefits of butterflies, bees, and hummingbirds, and then we'll get into our gardening portion. Florida has over 200 species of butterflies, some which can't be found anywhere else in the world. The zebra longwing is the state butterfly. You can see that one here in the middle. A lot of you probably have already seen that one and might not have known that's our state butterfly. It's present throughout the state through most of the year. Benefits of butterflies is ecosystem or habit conservation. A well-planned butterfly garden provides a safe place for butterflies and other wildlife to gather, find shelter, acquire food and water, and build their populations. It's also food, butterflies are also food for natural enemies. Healthy butterfly populations are able to attract and sustain a healthy population of beneficial insects or organisms. And butterflies can be very therapeutic. Butterfly gardens provide a soothing retreat from the everyday life. They're very relaxing to watch butterflies, or at least I think so. Bees, here's a couple facts on bees. Florida is home to over 300 species of wild bees, and 29 of these species are only found in Florida. There's two different kinds of bees, a generalist bee and a specialist bee. Generalist bees collect nectar and pollen from a wide variety of flowers. They aren't as picky when it comes to eating. While on the other hand, specialist bees have a very closely tight woven relationship with specific native plants. So for these bees, it's very important that they have that specific plant to forage on. Some benefits of bees. Honeybees produce not only honey, but also pollinate 1/3 of the food we eat. And native bees aren't used for honey production, but are still important pollinators. And then we have our hummingbirds. Some facts about hummingbirds is they only live in the Americas. There are 338 known species. 16 of them are in the US and 3 of them are in Florida. The most common is the ruby-throated, which is what we see in the picture here. They get about 3 inches long and can weigh as little as a penny. And they get their name from their wing sound because their wings can beat up to 200 times per second. And they also can do helicopter-like flying stunts. And what that means is not only can they fly forward, up, down, they can do backwards and even upside down. And some benefits of hummingbirds is pollination of many plants. The pollen gets stuck to their feathers and their beak, so as they go to different plants, they're able to transport it that way. Some of hummingbirds' favorite plants are coral, honeysuckle, shrimp plant, and firebush, which we'll go over some more in few slides. And they also are very therapeutic and fun to watch if you're able to find them. I haven't had luck yet, but I'm not giving up. Hopefully you guys have some luck getting hummingbirds into your yard because they are super fun to watch. So next, we're going to talk about site selection. And site selection is key to the success of establishing a new pollinator habitat. Your site should be practical to manage, maximize benefits to wildlife, and fit the overall goal of the landscape. Here's a bee fact. Many of our bees are ground nesters here in Florida. And when we're picking our sites, we want to try to pick sites that are rarely disturbed and also in a well-drained location. This gives a wonderful spot for the bees to make their homes as long as it is not disturbed too often. By disturbing the ground, you could possibly close the opening to the bees' homes. So that's not something we're trying to do. And then finally, with site selection, you want to think about access to water. You want to have easy access to water for irrigation, especially during that establishment time. Depending on the plant, that really can vary from 3 months to 2 years. So you want to make sure that you have good access to water. You can supplement that with hand watering or even using a rain barrel to collect rainwater. Once those plants are established, less water is usually required. So establishment time is a very important time to make sure you're getting water to those plants. All right, so now we are at plant selection, one of the fun parts here. Florida native plants are best at attracting and supporting a diverse population of pollinators. Native wildflowers in full sun will provide the most blooms, so that would equal the most nectar and pollen available. And I like to put in here, right plant, right place. We want to make sure that we are picking the correct plant for the space that we are going to be putting the plant. So we're setting this plant up for success. If it's a plant that likes full sun, we're putting it in the full sun. If it likes shade, we're putting in the shade, etc. We want to make sure that we are putting the right plant, right place, and setting up for success. Next, we want to think about providing a variety of different plant species that bloom at different times of the year. That way you're providing pollen and nectar throughout the year to all these different species of pollinators. You also want to think about offering a variety of flower sizes, colors, shapes, and heights in your landscape. This also attracts a larger variety of pollinators, and it adds a visual interest to your landscape. So you can kind of see here in this picture, we've got lower flowers, taller flowers, we've got yellow, we've got purple, little bit of different things going on here, and it really makes some visual interest when you're looking at it. Next, we have maintenance. Of course, no garden is without maintenance. We have to think about our weed control, pest control, watering, and pruning. We highly recommend to try to stay away from pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides when possible. I know sometimes it's not possible, but we're going to talk about some different ways that maybe you can try to treat some issues instead of going straight to chemicals. So for weed control, you want to think about properly prepping the site before you start putting in new plants. So prevention, we're preventing those weeds from growing. We want to get all those weeds out before we start putting in our new plants. A mechanical control would be you could hand pull those weeds if you get some more that come back in after you've done your plantings. You could cut them or use a weed trimmer. And then chemicals as a last resort. Herbicides that are specifically species specific. So we're using something that's not a broad range herbicide, something that's only going to focus on the one thing that might be a problem. Try to do it with as natural as possible products and spray at night because that is when pollinators are less active. And when it comes to pest control, it's really important to first correctly identify any pest because not all bugs are actually pests. And then you need to determine whether action is needed or not. Many insects are actually beneficial. We have a picture here of a ladybug, and that's a predatory insect that takes care of aphids, which is a very common pest. I usually get aphids quite often on my milkweed at home, and I actually have tons of ladybugs on there taking care of that situation for me. So it's real fun to see how these things work together, and that some bugs actually are beneficial. So keep that in mind. Identification of those so-called pests is your first resource to trying to take care of pest control. And then, of course, using chemicals, let's try to do this as a last resort. You do have the possibility of harming or killing pollinators if you're using chemicals, and we're trying to avoid that. We also want to avoid insecticides that resemble pollen that might look like granules or dust because the pollinators will think that this is pollen and will take it home with them. Which will obviously be a bad reaction for them. And if they take it back to the hive, it could possibly hurt more insects as well. And then watering. Little fun fact about bees, they can naturally sense a rainstorm is about to start, and that tells them that they need to go hide under things such as flowers and leaves. The ground nesting bees will go back into their nests beforehand. So when we're watering during the day and just out of the blue, the bees have no idea what to do because they weren't expecting for this water to happen. So in order to make sure we are not upsetting the bees, it's best to try to water at dusk, night, or dawn. That is when they are less active. Like I said, artificial watering has no warning system. So we want to make sure that those bees are able to take cover. And then if they're the ground nesting bees, that they can get back to their homes before possibly they get wet and can't find the door to their house again. Next, we have pruning. Of course, some pruning is going to be involved. This is really going to be up to you, how natural you want your landscape to look, or if you want it more manicured. Some pruning might need to be done in order to direct the growth or shape of your plants. Sometimes it also might be needed to promote plant health by removing dying, diseased, broken, or dead plants or parts of plants. But like I said, this is really your aesthetic. Sometimes, usually with wildflowers, it tends to be a little more natural, but you can definitely have a more manicured looking pollinator garden as well, if that's your style. And then here I just have a couple examples of pollinator gardens just to give you a couple ideas. I love this top left picture. The whole front yard has been turned into a pollinator garden. I'm hoping one day I could be that great. Don't know if my husband will approve of it, but maybe I can sweet talk him into it because I think that's quite beautiful. We also have a rain garden up here on the right, which can help reduce stormwater runoff. So it has multi-functions. We're providing for the pollinators through the different flowers, and it's also helping us collect some of that water on our landscape. Down at the bottom, we have a little corner garden, little small area probably in someone's backyard, and that's totally doable too. The sky's the limit, really, when you think about designing your landscape and your pollinator garden. I also like to mention not everyone has the traditional landscape or has that size of landscape to work with, and that's okay. There are other options, and really any size can make a difference. So maybe you live in an apartment or a condo, etc. So your spot is a little more limited. That's totally doable. You can try to do container gardens. That could be, in a small bucket, or we have a truck here that has a container garden. You could get real creative with it. You also have the option to do window boxes, or you can do a balcony and patio garden. So there's all kinds of options. And I don't want anyone to get discouraged thinking that I don't have a big landscape, I can't play my part, because every little bit really does help. And even those bees in our urban locations need food as well. So anything we can do is a positive. And then moving forward, we're going to talk about butterfly, bee, and hummingbird gardens. You're going to see a lot of overlap here. Like I had said, I just like to break it down in case there's something in particular that you're trying to bring into your landscape. So first, these are the components of a successful butterfly garden. We want adult nectar sources to attract and nourish those adult butterflies. Next, we want to have some larval host plants as a food source for the larvae. Shelter, vegetation that will protect the butterflies and the larvae from the elements. A water source is also nice to have if possible. Butterflies are incapable of drinking from freestanding water. So we have a suggestion of creating a butterfly puddling station, which we'll talk about on the next slide. It's kind of a fun little idea, something neat to put in your yard. And then, of course, avoid pesticides when possible. All butterfly life stages are very sensitive to pesticides. So if we can try to avoid those when possible, that is great. All right, so here is a butterfly puddling station. Butterflies have special requirements for drinking. They actually have a long, hollow, tube-like tongue called a proboscis, and that's how they get the water. They also use it when they're doing their pollinating thing and getting nectar. But if you wanted to make a puddling station for your yard, here are a couple really easy steps. This also works for bees as well. I briefly talk about that too. But I have one of these at my house, and it's pretty neat, especially fun if you have children or grandchildren. It's a fun little activity you could do with them. So basically what you do is you put sand in the bottom of a saucer, and then you do a layer of compost, and then put some pebbles on top of that. And then you're going to add water to the saucer. And you want to add the water just up to the pebbles. You don't want to cover the pebbles, because the pebbles will give a nice landing spot for the butterflies to keep their feet wet, and they can hold on and get a drink. So there's a fun little project for you guys. All right, so when choosing butterfly garden plants, there's some things to keep in consideration. Butterflies are attracted to brightly colored, simple flowers with a good place to perch. You want to think about a variety of shapes and colors. Different butterflies have different plants that they are attracted to. So the more You can incorporate as many colors of the rainbow as you can, the more butterflies you could possibly attract into your yard. Native plants, most larval host plants are native, and they're also adapted to this region, and they can attract other wildlife. So native plants are definitely a plus. You want to think about different blooming times. This provides butterflies food during times that they are naturally low. Excuse me. And then plant in shade and full sun. This also allows you to appeal to a wider variety of butterflies as well. But always keep in mind, right plant, right place. That's a number one rule. We want to make sure we're putting those plants where they're going to thrive. We're going to set them up for success. And here is a short, brief list of nectar plants. It's an example of how you can provide some year-round. This is a very short list. There are tons more. This is just a quick example. And you'll see a lot of these will probably overlap with the bees and the hummingbirds as well. But I just like to give you a little bit of an example. Here it shows what region they grow in and then also the bloom time. All right, so next are our bee gardens. Once again, think about that year-round food source to keep the bees happy and well fed. Aim to have at least 3 plants flowering at any given point in the year. That way you give a variety to the bees. Next, a variety of shelters. We'll talk about that a little bit. We have some examples of pollinator hotels, but most of the bees, 70% of them, of the Florida native bees, they nest in the ground. So we want to think back to that undisturbed ground that we talked about earlier in the presentation, since most of our bees actually are ground nesting bees. Once again, a water source. You can see there's another puddling station there at the bottom. Similar, it's got bigger rocks. Same idea though as we had done with the puddling for the butterflies. And then pesticide-free zone. Use pesticides only as needed. And then try to not spray during the day because that is when the bees are most active. All right, so pollinator hotels. Who can you expect to come visit you? There are a variety of insects that may come to your pollinator hotel and use it as a home. Not only bees and wasps, but also beetles, centipedes, and spiders. Most likely you will find solitary bees and wasps that will take up residence in your hotel. These solitary bees are not aggressive and typically don't bother humans. And the same thing with the solitary wasp, they tend to be less aggressive than the ones that group together, the wasps that group together. And here are a few examples of pollinator hotels. There are so many different ways and styles and things that you can use just from around your home to make pollinator hotels. There's all kinds of examples all over the internet. So these are just a couple. I just wanted to give examples, and they're real quick and easy. I'm sure you guys have seen this before where the little pieces of bamboo are used, the hollow stem bamboo. You could do that yourself. You can find them pre-made. It's a very common thing to have this bamboo cut for the bee hotels. I've also seen the bamboo put into mason jars, coffee cans, and flower pots. So really, sky's the limit. You can get creative depending on how you want it to look in your landscape. Another option is just drilling holes into a piece of wood, which you can see here on the right, real easy. You kind of use different bit sizes, and then you go varying depths, so 3 to 8 inches. This helps the bees make sure they know which one is their hole. They can tell it's different from another one. It kind of gives them their own unique place to go, and they know which is their home. And then, of course, you want to remember to change out your hotels every 2 to 3 years. You want to make sure you're keeping those nice and clean, and we're providing a nice place for our bees to live. And when it comes to plants for your bee garden, bees enjoy a mix of annuals, perennials, herbs, shrubs, and trees. They like all kinds of stuff. They tend to like flowers that are yellow, white, blue, and purple. And a fun fact, they can't see the color red. So they like composite flowers. That is something that's a wide or flat flower. You can see here the Stokes aster, or even the blanket flower that's behind it in the picture. That is a nice wide flat flower. They like something that they're able to stand on when they're going around doing their pollinator thing. They also like clustered flowers. So I have a picture of bee balm or horse mint. That's the next one in the right here. Also beautyberry, that can be considered clustered because they do have the little flowers on it before they turn into the fruits. Another would be a woody ornamental and trees. This is something that's commonly overlooked, but a lot of these do bloom in the winter. So this is a great option if you're trying to provide things throughout the year. And of course, we always say native plants, especially like we were talking about those specialist bees. They rely heavily on our native plants. So when you can, please do native. And I will actually give you some resources in a few slides on where and how you can find native plants for pollinators. And then this is another example of just a year-round palette of blooming plants for honeybees. Once again, it's broken down into the different regions, the bloom times throughout the year. And this is a very short example. There are all kinds of plants, once again, that are able to be considered nectar plants for honeybees. This is just a quick example, just to give you an idea. And then we have the components of a successful hummingbird garden. For hummingbirds, we need high energy nectar sources due to the high energy and activity of these little birds, especially during spring and summer, because this is when they are nesting and they require a lot of nectar at this time. They also need shelter and nesting areas. Nesting begins in April, and it's actually a really cute little nest that they have. I meant to put a picture in here. I forgot to do that. But a place for them to nest and shelter is a great component to have for your hummingbird garden. And then a hummingbird feeder. We highly suggest making plants the main source of their nectar and food because it's more natural, but sometimes that's just not enough. So we can offer the hummingbird feeder as well as supplemental for the feeding of the hummingbirds. And if you're looking to do plants, which we highly recommend, these are the kind of plants that hummingbirds like. They like flower colors that are red, orange, or pink. They like tubular flowers like hibiscus or the native coral honeysuckle. You can see the coral honeysuckle. Here's the first picture. A variety of species in several groupings. So think about having more than one flower, different kinds of flowers in your garden. That way the hummingbirds are able to feed, multiple hummingbirds are able to feed because they can be kind of territorial about their feeding locations. So if you can offer multiple locations to eat, that would be best. Keep all those hummingbirds happy and coming back. And then use natives, of course, when possible. And I got a little fun fact here. Hummingbirds have also been known to show an interest in red-colored lipstick, fingernails, and clothing. So if you're out there in the garden, that might be another way to get a hummingbird's attention with your lipstick, fingernails, or clothing. Just keep that in mind. And once again, this is another example of some plants that you could use in your landscape to attract hummingbirds. It's also a very short list, but just an example. Once again, it's broken down into regions and bloom times. That way you're able to provide things throughout the year for hummingbirds. And next, I'm going to go over a couple of resources. There's some great resources out there, and if you're not familiar with them, I want to make sure that you know that they're out there. That way you can find the best plants for your landscape and get some pollinators come into your house. First, Florida Friendly Landscaping has a butterfly garden app. It's great. It helps you design, plant, and maintain an attractive butterfly garden. And it also follows the Florida Friendly Landscaping principles. This app has 128, well, last time I looked, 128 butterfly attracting plants. It also does go over 62 of the common Florida butterflies. You can find out more information about them, and it has photos for identification. It's a really neat little app. And another fun thing about this app is you can create a printable list, a PDF, with any of the plants you choose. You could go through, pick out plants that you like, that you would like to have for your landscape, and you can make a little list, and you'll have exactly what you need for when you're going to the nursery. Florida Friendly Landscaping also has a bee garden app. So much like the other one, it tells you all the different kinds of plants that can attract bees. There is bee identification as well. There's 12 different bee groups, gives you colored photos and information. And this one, you can also create that PDF where you can print out and bring your list with you if you wanted to do that. Another great resource is Florida Association of Native Nurseries, also known as FAN. They have a great website where you can go in and look for native plants. On their website, there's all different ways that you can filter different ways to find plants if you want to look for a specific plant. The neat thing about this is they have these little pictures underneath each species of plant that shows what wildlife that plant attracts. And another neat thing about this website is if you were to pick a species of plant and you went onto the information page for that plant, they also provide local native nurseries that may have that plant in stock. So if you're not familiar with your native nurseries, this is a great way to go find plants and then find a possible nearby native nursery that has this. I do highly suggest, though, if you're going to pick one of those nurseries and you're in love with one of these plants, maybe give them a call ahead of time. I know things have been a little limited, so if you're in love with something in particular, give them a call ahead of time, make sure it's in stock before you go, or even have a backup. I always try to bring a couple different backup ideas of plants that I'm looking for, because it's common that you're not going to find a couple that are on your list. And that way you're not scrambling around, you know exactly what you're looking for and what you're doing. So it's great to have an idea and a plan for when you're going shopping. Another great resource is the Florida Native Plant Society. This too has all kinds of ways that you can filter through their website. They have all kinds of plants on here. What I like about theirs is they have a full section on attracting wildlife, and you can kind of just click off which one or all, like I've done here, that you would like to attract to your landscape. And then it'll bring up a list of all kinds of different plants that would work for your situation and to attract those different pollinators or wildlife. And then finally, we have the National Wildlife Foundation. This one is a fun little website. It's a little more limited, but it's still a great resource. You can go on here and find plants by your zip code. But what I really like is you can go in here and you can pick a butterfly or a moth specifically and click on that butterfly or moth, and then the website will tell you what plants that species of pollinator enjoys and how to get them into, hopefully attract them to your landscape. So this is also a really fun website to go and look for things on as well. And with that, I'm going to take questions. I made it through that really quick today, guys. So we got all kinds of time for questions. Let's see what we got here.
Melissa, do you want me to go through the questions for you, or
Are
you self-contained here?
I'm looking at them now.
Yeah.
Hundreds of millions from up to downside spots. Okay. Oh, good.
The first one is how do I plan an undisturbed location for bees while keeping my lawn mowed? How wide a berth do I need to give them?
So, well, keeping your lawn mowed, it's going to probably be an area where you're not going to have mowing happening. So something more in like a landscape bed would be a better idea. As far as a number for a berth of how wide, I would have to look that up. I'm not positive on the exact inches or feet or such that you would have to give, but I can get that for you and follow up with you on that one. That was Patsy.
And then the next question is also from Patsy. Is it best to pollinators around gardens or away from them? Not quite clear on that question. Do you get that, Melissa?
Is it best pollinators around gardens? I'm not sure. If you want to clarify, I'm happy to try to answer.
Patsy, you can either unmute or put something in the chat to clarify that question. And then Stephanie asked, for the butterfly water dish, is there a safe way to protect against mosquitoes?
That is a great question, and I meant to bring that up. I just highly suggest changing that water out every couple days or so. With mine, I haven't had an issue with it. The water tends to dry up quicker than I have to replace it. So I haven't had an issue with the mosquitoes, but as long as you're keeping an eye on it and switching it out, you shouldn't have a problem with mosquitoes either.
And then Matt commented he likes the paddling saucer. I'm going to make one. Yeah, you can make one. Do you have some ideas, Melissa, how to put one together without buying something fancy?
Oh yeah, you can use all kinds of stuff from around your house. You could use like the little saucer that goes under a pot, or you could use even like a shallow bowl if you wanted to, or Tupperware if need be. Really, any sort of shallow dish would be best, and then just add in that sand and compost, and most importantly, make sure you have those pebbles or rocks at the top so your pollinators are able to step on them and you don't fill the water above the rocks, because that's where they're going to land, and they want to have nice secure landing and footing there for them.
And then Dawn shared a link to bee hotels from the North Carolina extension. I don't know if you have anything similar that you can send out or follow up with.
I do. I have it in my resources from our local extension information.
Okay. And then how do you change out a hotel without negatively impacting residents?
I think the best way to do that is, well, it's hard. Sometimes they build them where you can take out individual tubes. So that is easy. So if someone's not using a tube in general, you could clean out that one and replace it with another one. You could also take if you have a new pollinator hotel that you're going to put out, you could put that out, and then hopefully they move over to the new one. Really, you're going to have to change it during the day when everyone's out and about doing their thing. This isn't something to do in the evening, because then they'll all be back at home in their little hole. But that's the best way.
And then, thank you, Melissa. So do insects like ladybugs come naturally? Are there places you can actually buy some to bring into your garden?
Yes and yes. My ladybugs have just found the aphids and decided this is a great buffet, and they have stayed. But I know there are places that you can buy ladybugs. I'm not positive on where, but I know I've seen them online. So if you do a little Google, I'm sure you could find where to purchase them, because there is a way to purchase them as well.
Okay, thank you. Would bees in this area need to be put into hibernation I have a friend in South Carolina that hibernates his bees in the winter.
That is a good question, and I am not positive. I am going to bee college, and I'm sure I will learn all about that, but I don't have a positive answer on that, so I don't want to steer you the wrong way and tell you yay or nay. But I could follow up on that.
Okay.
I apologize that I don't have that answer.
You cannot know everything, Melissa. There's so
I-
much to know about all this.
I'm trying though.
All right. David asks, I live in an apartment. Sun doesn't shine much on my second floor porch. Any ideas on how to keep a pollinator garden? Sun only shines on one of the porch in the morning and the other side of the porch at dusk.
There's definitely flowers and pollinator plants that will grow in partial sun or shade. If you use some of those resources like I showed, you can go in there and you can put in your situation. So you would have partial sun, or depending on if you put it on one corner or how you're going to set it up, you can go onto those resources and plug those different things in, and it'll help you come up with plants that'll fit your situation. These are great resources. You can put all kinds of information in there and really narrow it down and filter it to be just what you need.
Okay, and he follows up with the question, will humidity help if the sun doesn't hit the garden?
That I'm not sure on. Doris,
Okay.
do you know anything?
No, humidity as of helping what? I'm not quite sure about the question, David, if you would elaborate on this. So we are talking about sun. Yes, some of the pollinator plants do need sun, and but there are other options, I think. And then with the humidity, I'm not quite sure what you are referring to, in which context that would be. And then Dawn asks about the bee college you are attending. Please explain.
So Bee College is offered through the University of Florida. They have some different options. They have the option to
What?
Sorry, everyone. I don't know what happened.
That was weird.
All right. So back to Bee College. I don't know where I left off. Basically, it's through UF. They have an online course. They have an in-person course. Everyone I've talked to that's taken the courses has felt very well prepared to have their own beehives. So really, it's not only just to learn about bees, it's about beekeeping as well.
I think that will be really fun and interesting.
I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. So Jeffrey says he puts his bees in the refrigerator during the winter when it's too cold outside. Ha
That's that's interesting.
ha. Poor bees. Oh boy. So do we have any more questions that you like to talk about or mention, or something you'd like to share? You can either speak up, unmute. I don't know if you can unmute yourself. I'm not a host, so but Melissa should be able to unmute you if need be, or put something in the chat if there's anything else you'd like to comment on, or
Garden lights, yeah, that would be acceptable for your garden. It shouldn't have I wouldn't think have much effect on the pollinators since they'll be in bed by then. In bed.
Yeah, you shouldn't have bright lights. It can be disturbing to insects if they have this really modern LED lights, and they are just
those are very bright.
and it's not good for insects and not good for other nocturnal wildlife either. So
I haven't had problems. I have light, like, what would you call those? Kind of like Christmas lights, but they're not super, super bright. I haven't noticed any problems with pollinators being attracted to those in the evening. So like you said, as long as they're not super, super bright, because some of these are quite bright. And it's not good for wildlife in general. Confuses them.
Right.
But something light, little more dim, little more mood lighting would be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we are talking lights in general for wildlife, like when the turtles hatch at the beach and they get totally disoriented, not going towards the water, they go towards the light instead. So that is something where light can really be harmful.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for this. I've been anxious for this. Have a blessed day. You too, David. Thank you
too.
so much. Melissa did a great job. I always enjoy that presentation. It's so positive, and you have a feel you can do something and you can really enjoy that.
Yep,
So,
everyone
it's
can
a
do
really
something.
great fun of gardening.
Yes. Thank you both so much.
Certainly.
All right. Have a wonderful day, everyone.